Hello, this HighByte Intelligence Hub video covers data exchange with Azure. There's a few configurable options that Intelligence Hub provides to exchange data with Azure. Bulk data, often in files, can be sent to blob storage, data lake. Streaming data can be sent via a standard connection to event hubs. And finally, data can be exchanged using MQTT with Event Grid. So, of course, the option that's chosen and whether or not we send or obtain data from Azure is dictated by the use case. Today, we'll focus on a use case that simulates an oil and gas environment. We have well pads and wells in a well field, and the process control for those wells varies. In some cases, data is being obtained from Ignition, some cases from a kept server EX, also from OSI Pi Historian, Aviva Pi Historian. And what we're going to do is normalize that data into a standard model and send the process data to event hubs with asset context. So let's take a look at how we do that. So I start in Intelligence Hub with the pipeline. This pipeline is currently running. And what it's doing is it's running and it's obtaining data every minute that could be sent to any frequency that might make sense. We're using a smart query to obtain data for both wells and well pads from our namespace. We'll get to that in a minute. And then we determine if it's well or well pad data in a switch. And then finally, send the well and well pad data to Event Hub. So let's take a look at how we do that. Of course, we need to connect. So we have connections to Ignition, and we have, of course, created a secure connection with our Ignition module connection that can obtain data directly from a tag provider. And here's the data for a well, and that's very similar to the data that we'll be obtaining from kept server EX. We have established a secure connection. We have some inputs that we previously defined. Here we're obtaining data for a branch read, and again, similar data. And then finally, a connection to Pi. Secure connection using the Intelligence Hub agent, which communicates with Pi Asset Framework SDK. And here we're querying the database by asset ID, and then obtaining, in this case, this is well pad information. So once we have that information, we want to model it. So it's coming from disparate sources, and we'll take a look at the model that we've defined for the wells, and you can see the data that we're obtaining, pressure information, etc. And then this is used in an instance, and an instance is for a specific asset. And here is where we map the data that we previously created with a connection input for kept server X, for example, and then we can obtain the data, and then we just map it into to create a reference. What I'm doing here in my references, in some cases I'm applying JavaScript. I'm also in my initialization block for my instance, I'm obtaining data from a utility API to make an energy calculation, and I'm doing that here in my um, initialization block, and then I use that in the actual instance where I define the an attribute for the cost and do a cost calculation. So we have model data in an instance, and then what we want to do is provide some asset context. So I've built using namespace and asset hierarchy, and then I can map the instance information to the respective asset that I've defined. And here I can just do a test read, and we can see the data that we're obtaining for a well. Ultimately, what I want to do is obtain that data in a pipeline using a smart query, and then send the data to Event Hub. So we're back to where we started. We haven't looked here at the connection output yet, so just to look at that, we've securely connected to Azure Event Hub, a specific hub and consumer group, and then we've can define an output where we're sending the data to Azure. So that's the pipeline, and that's the data pipeline that we've created. Of course, we want to verify that the data is indeed going to Azure Event Hub, and we can see that here. And here, I have not formatted the data, but you can see in this JSON, this is the data that we're sending for each of those different attributes. So that's an example of using Intelligence Hub to send data to Azure Event Hubs. Again, our use case was an oil and gas application where we're obtaining data for wells and well pads in in an oil field, and we're obtaining disparate data from multiple sources: a historian, Kepsar VX OPC server, and Ignition SCADA. This is just dealing with the real-time process data and sending that to a process table via Event Hubs. Thank you for your time.